Coming up in this episode of In Clear Focus.
Fraud is binary. There's no ambiguity. There's no percentage of fraud. Either it is fraud or it's not. So at the end of the day, you need to have some type of solution that identifies that.
You're listening to In Clear Focus, fresh perspectives on marketing and advertising, produced weekly by Big Eye, a strategy-led full-service creative agency growing brands for clients globally. Hello, I'm your host, Adrian Tennant, Chief Strategy Officer. Thank you for joining us. Today, our focus is on the blight of the digital advertising landscape, namely ad fraud. Recent estimates suggest that digital ad fraud costs are projected to reach $100 billion by the end of this year, up from $87 billion in 2023. Up to 16% of all ad views are estimated to be fraudulent, while 38% of web traffic is automated, with almost a quarter attributable to so-called bad bots used for fraud. Our guest today is at the forefront of combating this growing threat. Rich Kahn is the co-founder and CEO of Anura.io, a leading ad fraud detection solution. With over 3 decades of experience in digital marketing, Rich has established 5 multi-million-dollar internet companies. His venture into ad fraud prevention began with a personal encounter with its harmful effects at Izanga, a marketing company Rich co-founded, where he observed how fraudulent clicks and bots would deplete ad budgets and misrepresent campaign data. This led him to launch Anura, a standalone ad fraud detection platform that uses live monitoring and AI. In the past year alone, Anura exposed $1.2 billion in fraudulent activity for its users. To discuss the evolution of ad fraud detection and prevention and its impact on digital advertising, I'm delighted that Rich is joining us today from Delaware. Rich, welcome to In Clear Focus.
Thanks for having me today.
You've had an impressive career in digital marketing spanning over 3 decades. What specifically led you to focus on ad fraud detection?
Sure. In 2003, my wife and I built a company, and it was an ad network. So think of like Google ads, but much smaller scale. Google was, 50 cents a click just to drive a visitor. We were like 5 cents a click. But what happened was when we first launched it, people were really happy with it. And then all of a sudden they started saying, hey, it's not converting as well. What's going on? Something's changed. And we found out it was fraud. So I knew what it was. And I said, you know what? I don't want to be the guy solving fraud, laughable as what I do today. But what we ended up doing was we went back and tried finding a company that I can license their technology, bolt it onto my platform and continue growing my business. And nothing existed back then. That was 2004-05. The first commercially available fraud solution didn't come out until I think it was 2008 or 9. As a developer, I figured I could write the code myself, which I did. And I continued to develop it and grow it. And then companies started coming into the market that did this. But what the key was, I had clients asking to license our fraud technology outside of our platform so they can use it when they're buying Google or whatever other channels they were buying from. So we had the idea, let's spin this off into another company. But before we did, we wanted to test against the market leaders in the space. And we did. And we found out we were more accurate, more thorough, finding more fraud. We had really a good product, so we decided to launch it. So it was actually April 1st of 2017, we launched Anura as a standalone product. And we've been doing fraud detection ever since.
For listeners who might be unfamiliar with the scope of the problem, could you explain what ad fraud is and why it's such a significant issue for marketers today?
Sure. So everybody's heard of bots. And when bots click on your ad, they're never going to convert, because they're just to do a simple action, click on your ad, charge you money, and people understand that's a problem in this space. So usually when I mention the word bots, people kind of understand that, but they don't understand the scope of the problem. So let's look at a bot. A bot clicks on your Google ad, goes to your landing page, and it keeps doing that. Let's say you're trying to generate a lead for your business to sell auto insurance. I'll just use that as an example. It's a big industry. And they come along and they click on your ad a bunch of times, but they're not filling out the form. So any good marketing manager is going to say, hey, I don't like this traffic. It's not converting for me. Let's get rid of it. And the fraudsters know this. So what do is they have the bot click on a couple of times and then fill out the form. And maybe they'll use, somebody's information that they stole off the internet. So use my information, Rich Kahn from Middletown, Delaware. They'll have my email address. They'll have my phone number. They'll fill out the form. They'll hit submit. And then the client thinks, oh, I got a conversion out of it. Then they call me and either A, I don't answer the phone because I don't recognize the number, Or B, they get me on the phone and I'm like, I never filled out your form. So a lot of problems happen with that. Not to go crazy into what that's a TCPA violation. If you call somebody and don't have express written permission to call them, it's a violation, which is suable. And it's the largest growing class action lawsuits in this country is TCPA class action lawsuits. But that's just all the stuff that can go wrong with it. People don't understand how often it's happening. So let's look at it this way. In 2023, as a global society, we spent about $600 billion in digital marketing. In 2023, based on our estimates of scanning hundreds of clients and looking at the data, we're estimating that $125 billion was stolen based on fraudulent activity. So you're looking at just over north of 20%. And typically, on average, when we bring in a new client, we're typically finding between 20 and 25% fraud on the network. So if we help them eliminate that and take that budget and spend it on performing traffic, their ROI goes way up. And that's really what it's all about, is trying to identify wasted spend and get rid of it.
Got it. I've heard you mention that on average, 50% of ads in programmatic advertising are shown to fraudulent visitors. What makes programmatic advertising particularly vulnerable to fraud?
All right, so look at it this way. I always try to explain to people that fraudulent people are developers, and developers were lazy. So whenever we build something, we want to build it for the maximum exposure we can get. So think about it, years ago when viruses were on the path, like so many viruses were out there. What did they attack? Macs or Windows? They attacked Windows because it was the lion's share of the population. So they build a piece of code, they can target 90% of the market. If they went after Macs, they were only targeting 10% of the market. So it didn't make sense. Same here with programmatic. Programmatic is, I think it's still the largest channel of digital marketing. So if you figure there's $600 billion spent and, 400 or 500 billion is spent in programmatic, there's your reason why they're targeting it. I don't want to get too crazy into the weeds, but this is an important point that's not spoken about enough. When you go to a DSP, so a demand service provider, to buy programmatic space, and if you ask them the question, which most people don't, what do you do for fraud detection? They're going to tell you they use, and fill in the blank, they use some fraud vendor on what they call the pre-bid solution, so that when the auction takes place in the programmatic environment, and somebody comes along and says, hey, I've got a visitor, they'll scan it using a fraud solution to say, this is good traffic or this is bad traffic. If it's bad traffic, they won't bid on it. If it's good traffic, then they'll bid on it. And that's the story that they tell you. So as a client, you feel comfortable and said, yeah, this is good, I'm going to buy it. What people don't realize is that there's two types of fraud classifications. So let's go back a little bit. So the IAB and the 4As got together probably about a dozen years ago and came out with an industry standard document that if you're going to be a fraud detection company in this space, because they were seeing a lot of fraudulent players get in the space that were selling fake fraud detection solutions, they said, this is the minimum standard you should follow. And then every 3 months, every quarter, they update their standards based on new findings and new things that are changing in the space. To understand that a little bit, there's probably 80 plus companies in the marketplace that do some type of fraud detection. There's only 7 of us that are actually certified to follow those standards. So if you're looking for a fraud vendor, find out if they're tagged certified against fraud or MRC accredited. Those two are important things. This way, at least somebody has audited their system and they're following the industry standards. So in the industry standards, what's important is how they classify fraud. So they don't call it fraud. They call it IVT, invalid traffic. And there's 2 classifications of IVT. So you have GIVT, which is your general invalid traffic. So it's your basic data center attacks and known bots, things like that. So it's basic information there. The second thing is SIVT, sophisticated invalid traffic. So your advanced bots, AI bots, malware, human fraud, those more advanced types of attack. So understanding that baseline, when you go to a DSP and ask them for fraud detection, they're going to tell you that they have, like I said, they're using some fraud detection company on the pre-bid side. Now, the problem with the pre-bid side is that's a GIVT filter, which they're not going to tell you. That's a general invalid traffic filter. All they use is the IP address and user agent to identify if it's real or fake. It's only 2 data points. And from that, you can find some fraud, but you're not going to find it all. In fact, if you ask them to get some details, how much fraud is that catching, they'll typically tell you it's 1% to 3% fraud, which is right. However, if you embed an SIVT filter into your campaign and track it once your ad is exposed to the end user, you're going to find that on the sophisticated invalid traffic filter, you're going to be finding about 50% of the traffic is fraudulent. So what's happening is you think you're protected, you feel comfortable because you don't know the right questions to ask, And yet you're totally exposed at the highest level of any digital marketing channel is programmatic at 50%.
One aspect of your platform is its definitive scoring solution. Rich, could you explain how this works?
Sure. The average fraud solution in the market returns a numerical score, typically 0 to 100. And what happens is they're doing all these different checks and they'll say, oh, this check, let's add 10 points. Oh, this check is going to worth 30 points. And once that visitor reaches, let's call it 70 points, most of them are 65 or 70 points is when they say, okay, time to block this traffic. Once they give you a score of above 70, then it says, okay, block this traffic because they're 70% confident that it's fraudulent or it's 70% probable to be fraudulent. That's what the documentations will read. But from the mathematician in me, what about the other 30%? Can't that be real? And the last thing you want to do is block a real person from accessing your site. I'll give you a perfect example, and I'll get back to this. I had a content writer. She was making a purchase on a site she's made before. It was women's fashion. She was buying, I think, a purse, and it wouldn't let her make the purchase. It thought she was a bot. She tried different browsers, a different device, couldn't figure it out. And I think what was happening, they were blocking her IP address. So the entire IP address where she was in her home was blocked, so she couldn't make the purchase. She got frustrated, went to the competitor, was easily able to make the purchase. It's just from now on, I'm going to use this company because I don't have any issues. So false positives are really bad for your business. And if that happens once in a blue moon, okay, maybe it's the cost of doing business. But what you'll find is that on average, systems that do a numerical scoring system, again, have a high level of false positives. In fact, what we've been tracking is north of 15% false positives on most of our competitors based on client testing and feedback. With us, the only way we're going to tell you that it's bad and you should block it is when we're 100% certain it's not real. And based on that, we're 99.999% accurate when identifying it. It's very rare that we're wrong. And if we are, and a client brings it to us, we'll go figure out what went wrong and fix it. But at the end of the day, it's all about being 100% confident, not 70%. Our goal is not to just wow our clients with how much fraud we're catching. It's wow our clients with the accuracy and the amount of fraud that we catch.
Well, reflecting the example you just gave, many advertisers seem to accept a certain level of fraud as a cost of doing business. Rich, what's your perspective on this mindset?
When I talk to the brands, they don't want to spend a penny on fraud if they can avoid it. Now, again, there's got to be a cost factor there. Like if you're spending $500 a month on fraud and it's going to cost you $2,000 to solve it, it doesn't make sense financially to make that decision. But most people, let's say they're spending $100,000 a month on traffic, and let's go with the average, 25% of that's fraud. That means that they're losing $25,000 every single month to fraud. And those guys, believe me, are not going to say it's acceptable. They're going to find a way to try to avoid that once they identify that they have it. There really is no acceptable amount. But again, at the end of the day, you're never going to be able to drop your rate to 0%. So if you're buying strictly programmatic and we're looking at 50% fraud, what's acceptable? You're going to be happy with anything less than 50%. My recommendation is let's try to get you under 5%. You were never going to get to 0, but let's first cut it in half. Let's do some, and we have a whole process for this. Get you from 50% down to 25%. And then as soon as we hit that goal, let's do it again. Let's cut it in half again. We keep cutting it in half until we're down to a point where we're spending a lot of time trying to save a fraction of a percent. And that usually is once we get them under 5%, that's usually where they're happy because they were at 50%. Now they're at under 5%. And most of our clients, we can get to 1% or less.
For agencies managing multiple client campaigns, what reporting capabilities does Anura offer to help them demonstrate ROI and the effectiveness of fraud prevention?
I've seen just about every dashboard on the industry that's out there. Nothing comes close to what we do. In fact, we spend more money to generate our dashboard than any other solution in the marketplace because we have all this summarized data. So you can drill down and let's say I find fraud coming from a given website on a programmatic exchange. I can show you the proof behind it. I can show you, look, it's all coming from old web browsers. It's all coming from one location. It's coming from certain devices or device types or certain types of connections. Like you might have, 100% of your traffic is coming from mobile. Now, unless you have a mobile-only campaign, that's questionable because it should be about 60% mobile. But I've seen this where I had somebody, I had 100% of their traffic coming from mobile, but none of their traffic was coming from a cellular device, which doesn't make sense. So our dashboard will give what we call the proof of fraud. So we can actually show you things that don't make sense. A perfect example, I just had one last week where the guy used one fraud solution. The fraud solution found 10% fraud. Then he was selling his traffic to Google. So it was called Search Arb. He was selling his traffic to Google, and Google was identifying 60% fraud. So you see there was a big discrepancy. We come along, we found 96% fraud. And the guy's like, doesn't make sense. Like, that's so much traffic. And I'm like, we can prove it. So we were able to show him that 96% of the traffic came from an application that wasn't even in the Google Play Store. And we couldn't even find it online. And it had so much traffic, it would compete with major brand apps. I'm like, so how do you expect to get all that traffic from an application that you can't even download in the Play Store? And he goes, that doesn't make sense. And that's kind of what our data is for. Like, we can't disclose our secret sauce, right? Because then someone's going to try to replicate and build what we built. But if I can give you enough information that you're questioning the traffic yourself, and there's good questions that need answers, that's what we're trying to do. That's the proof of fraud. On top of that, ours is a scale, right? We're going to show you, hey, you launched with us, you got 25% fraud. And then all of a sudden we get you down to 10% fraud or 5% fraud. And you don't feel a difference, that would be a problem. But you should see an ROI difference on your back end, on your true conversions, your true back ends, your sales, your leads, whatever it is you're trying to generate. You'll see that difference, that our number matches the performance of your campaign. And that really is what locks it in. Uber was using a fraud solution, and they had basically chopped it all down and got it to the point where the fraud solution that they were using says, okay, your traffic is really good. It's under acceptable range is what they said. So let's say it's under a couple percentage points. And they were like, great, no more fraud in the network. And then they shut off all the spend in one given month. You can look this up. It's I think it was like 2022, and then it happened to them once in 2019 also. They shut off all the traffic, and their number of new riders didn't change. And we're talking like $100 million a month in spend. And the number of new riders didn't change. It was all organic. So their fraud solution was failing them because it wasn't able to identify all this other fraudulent traffic they were buying. A lot of it was programmatic, by the way.
Let's take a short break. We'll be right back after this message. In partnership with our friends at Kogan Page, this month's Big I Book Club selection is Marketing for Social Change: How to Turn Purpose into Business and Social Impact. The book's author, Kian Bakhtiari, presents a practical guide for brands looking to create meaningful social impact while building authentic purpose into their business strategy. Marketing for Social Change shows how brands can move beyond performative purpose to create lasting positive change. Through compelling real-world case studies, the book demonstrates how creativity and action can drive both social impact and business success. As an InClear Focus listener, you can save 25% on Marketing for Social Change when you order directly from the publisher at koganpage.com. Just enter the exclusive promo code BIGI25 at checkout. Shipping is always complimentary for customers in the US and the UK. So let Marketing for Social Change be your roadmap to building a purpose-driven brand that makes a real difference. Welcome back. I'm talking with Rich Kahn, CEO of Anura.io, an ad fraud detection platform that uses live monitoring and AI. Rich, how is the landscape of ad fraud changing?
There's a couple of different things. One, obviously fraudsters have new tools to build and develop fraudulent activity. In fact, we're all familiar with ChatGPT. Well, if you jump on the dark web, you can download a product called Fraud GPT, which will actually write bots for you. And you can actually, I need a bot that does this. And you just write it out in English and it'll actually write the code. You just have to have enough technical knowledge of how to deploy that, which is not hard. You can hire somebody from Fiverr, they can do it for you. It's pretty simple. So the AI is making it easier for bot creators to make bots that are hard to detect. Bots are looking more and more natural. So if you do screen recordings and you're trying to watch, does this look like a bot where, it used to be very specific. If a bot hit your page, you'd be able to watch the mouse do things that a human wouldn't do. And now the bots can do things that humans do. So it makes it more difficult. On our side, it's another tool to help us identify fraud. So we both have the same tool sets. It's just a matter of how we use them. We're a big fan of machine learning because you can dictate to machine learning what you want it to do and how you want it to do it, and have the human expertise take advantage of that tool. AI is a little different, at least the ones we've been testing with kind of want to do their own thing. They kind of want to learn on their own. They kind of want to, it's like a child, like you tell them to do something and they kind of go off and do their own thing, and you can guide them and change them, but it's at the end of the day, they're going to do what they want. So for us, we are still happy with the machine learning we've been building and testing for years. That seems to be a really solid thing. But we know that AI is going to play more and more of a role in helping to identify these type of bots down the road.
Excellent. You talked about the importance of third-party certification in the fraud detection industry. Rich, why is this significant, and what should marketers look for when evaluating solutions?
Okay. The reason why it's important is it's a standard set of industry standards that should be followed. So here's two organizations, the IAB and the 4As, huge in the internet advertising space, and they recognize the fact that because a fraud solution is a SaaS-based product, a lot of fly-by-night companies are going to pop up out of the woodwork and say we can do fraud detection and kind of rip off the market. So they saw that it was going to be important to have a certification process to it. Nobody wants to give up their secret sauce, but when we go through certification, we have to disclose code, database, processes. Like we have to trust somebody to disclose it to. And these are organizations that are trustworthy that can do that. So they can identify whether you're doing the right thing or not. The reason for it is I can't tell you how many people I talk to that are using a fraud solution that's not certified. And they come to us and they're complaining that, they're following their advice and their campaigns are tanking. What do we do? A perfect example, we hired a company to manage our Google spend. We just didn't have the time for it. We hired them to Google spend and we said, but you're going to use Anura as part of the process in managing our campaign. And they said, sure. And 3 months into it, they said, that's it. We're using a fraud solution, for the rest of our clients that nobody's using. None of our managers are using it because it doesn't work. It wasn't a certified fraud solution. And they said, so we want to basically use your technology across all our clients. And they have a couple hundred clients. So it's a nice deal for us. So ultimately, if you're looking for a fraud solution, like I said, you can look under tag. It's tagtoday.net. And you can type in the name of the fraud solution that you're evaluating to see if they have their certification. And the certification looking for is Tag Certified Against Fraud. So it's Tag CAF is their abbreviation for it. If they're not there, they're not following minimum standards. So you don't know what you're going to get. So I just helped everyone whittle it down from 80 solutions down to 7. So what makes the difference between the 7? Test them. Most of them offer a free trial. Put them to the test and make sure they pass your test. Make sure the data makes sense to you. And based on how they work with you, the data they provide, the accuracy of the data that they're providing, because before you trust your marketing budget to some third-party software, you want to make sure that they're doing the right thing. So test them. I would love to say, hey, just use us. But in all honesty, I want customers testing. We just had a customer of ours 4 years said, oh, a new solution has been hounding us. We're going to give them a test. I'm like, yeah, great, go for it. Shoot, here's an ebook on how to test fraud solutions. We want you testing because we're that confident with our ability. But yeah, at the end of the day, you want to test the solutions, but I kind of say is the minimum requirement, make sure that they're tag certified against fraud or MRC accredited, which is the Media Rating Council. Because there are solutions out in the marketplace that literally give you the ability to dial up and dial down the amount of fraud you deliver to a client. And that's not what they say. They say, hey, if you don't believe with this rule, you can turn it off or you can change the sensitivity. Fraud is binary. There's no ambiguity. There's no percentage of fraud. Either it is fraud or it's not. So at the end of the day, you need to have some type of solution that identifies that.
Great advice. Many advertisers run campaigns, of course, across multiple platforms, Google, Meta, and the various programmatic networks. Rich, what recommendations do you have for anyone responsible for developing a cohesive fraud prevention strategy across these different channels?
At this day and age, you need a fraud solution as part of your overall strategy. The second part of that is follow the money. Look at the conversions. I've talked to a client, they were getting all these conversions and they were shopping cart. So people putting stuff in their shopping cart. They had two types of fraud. People would come in, run through their site, put a bunch of stuff in the shopping cart and then abandon the shopping cart at a high enough level that it was something that they had to look at. Again, follow the money. And then they had the other side of fraud where they were coming in, putting stuff in the shopping cart and using stolen credit cards to make the purchases. And the reason for that is the average affiliate marketer gets paid within 7 business days, and it could take months before a credit card chargeback comes in. So they knew they can take advantage of these stolen credit cards, make all these commissions, walk away before it was even found. So you want to follow the money. If you're looking at your traffic and you identify each business a little different, maybe you're looking for branding, maybe you're looking for lead generation or e-commerce, whatever it is that you're looking for, there's some goal of your campaign, follow the back-end math, and you're going to be able to identify if the solution you chose to help you identify it in the beginning is doing the job or missing something, because nobody cares more about your business than you. So you want to keep tabs on that as well. You want to have a solution you can trust, but you always want to be checking the back-end data, because there's data that you have that the fraud solution doesn't have. And I'll give you another example for that. We have a company, a large gaming company out of Germany called Gagen. They're known for a game called War Thunder. And what they were having was people running bots that would come in, create accounts, play the game up to a certain level, and then sell that ID on the black market for a couple of bucks so people can skip certain levels and start at other levels. I didn't even know it was a thing, but they were telling me it was taking them 3 weeks on average to find a fraud ring. And by then the damage is already done, because what's happening is those bots walk into the game and now all the advertisers are getting exposed to bots. So now the advertisers are complaining that their ads aren't being shown to real people, and it creates a whole issue. So they tested our technology over a 1 month period, realized we were finding stuff they were missing. We were doing it before they logged into the system. It was all real time, but they keep an eye on the back end because they have all this rich user behavior data. If we miss something, they might be able to pick up on it and let us know about it. So it's important, follow the money, follow the behind the scenes, look at all the data you have to ensure that your solution that is running, whether it's a third party or not, is solving the problem for you.
It definitely sounds like a game of whack-a-mole. But Rich, looking ahead, what developments do you anticipate in ad fraud prevention over the next few years?
It's going to get worse. Yeah, fraud is going to continue to grow. Like I said, last year was a $125 billion loss. That's a big market. More and more people that are seeing that where their moral compass doesn't point north are like, I want to get in on the game. In fact, there was an article posted, I think a year and a half ago, that said that the average fraudster that commits ad fraud makes an average of $5 million a year.
Whoa.
It's way more than I make. So I'm like, hey, maybe I'm in the wrong game. But unfortunately, my moral compass points north. So it's not something I could ever do and never sleep with my, because at the end of the day, there really are no laws against doing it. So it's not illegal. But you and I both know from common sense, it's theft. You're stealing money from a company.
Yeah.
And that's really what ultimately is happening. But they haven't been able to I know they have a few out there, but none of them that specifically say this is called theft, this is punishable by X. Hasn't happened yet. And the biggest problem is a lot of this happens from overseas in countries that don't recognize our laws. So again, legally, there's not a whole lot you can do about it. Our best defense is avoidance. Let's make it so difficult for a fraudster to defraud your site and your campaigns, they go somewhere else.
It's a fascinating topic. Great conversation. Rich, if listeners would like to learn more about Anura's ad fraud prevention solution, what's the best way for them to get in touch?
The best way is our website, anura.io. We have probably over 300 blogs. We have dozens of white papers, ebooks, lots of resources that you can learn from. You can always give us a call. Our number's on the site. You can always give us a call and just, hey, this is the problem I'm having. Can you solve it? If they're just looking to learn more information and really start to understand the topic, there's some great ebooks. In fact, we're about to produce, it probably will roll out in Q1. It's a comprehensive guide on ad fraud. Like right now we have ad fraud ebook 101. It's probably a 10-page report, and it gives you good bird's eye view. This one is a comprehensive guide. I think it's coming in around 60 or 70 pages, some real detail, some depth, some structure to it. We give it away free. It's on our site. You'll be able to download that stuff and just learn more until you're ready to start solving the problem. Then our contact information is all over the site. We can jump on a call, walk you through stuff. Heck, we even do a free trial so you can see how much fraud you're dealing with and know where it's coming from.
Rich, thank you very much for being our guest this week on In Clear Focus.
I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thanks again to my guest this week, Rich Kahn, CEO of Anura.io. As always, you'll find a complete transcript of our conversation with timestamps and links to the resources we discussed on the In Clear Focus page at bigeyeagency.com. Just select Insights from the menu. Thank you for listening to In Clear Focus, produced by Big Eye. I've been your host, Adrian Tennant. Until next week, goodbye.